The water swallowed her whole, dragging her down into darkness as the current seized her body like iron shackles. And Quinn Xavier knew without thinking that he had exactly seconds to decide between the comfortable solitude he had carefully built around himself for the past 6 years and the terrifying possibility of letting someone else matter again. He dropped the reins of his mare and ran. The spring rains had turned the usually placid tributary near Jamestown, Virginia, into a roaring beast, swollen with muddy water that churned and frothed as it carved new channels through the riverbank. Quinn had been riding home from town with supplies when he saw the wagon teetering on the edge, saw the young woman scrambling to control the panicked horses, saw the moment everything went wrong. The wagon lurched sideways, the woman was thrown clear, and then she was gone, swept away by water that cared nothing for her screams. Quinn hit the river at a full sprint, the cold shocking his lungs as he dove beneath the surface. The current grabbed him immediately, spinning him like a leaf, but years of swimming in these waters as a boy gave him the knowledge he needed. He angled his body downstream, letting the flow carry him faster than it carried her, his eyes burning as he searched the murky brown depths. There. A flash of blue fabric, pale hands grasping at nothing. He kicked hard, arms pulling through the water with powerful strokes that closed the distance between them. His fingers caught her dress, then her arm, and he hauled her against his chest as they both tumbled downstream. She was not moving, not fighting, and that terrified him more than the water. He wrapped one arm around her ribcage and angled toward the far bank where the current was slightly weaker, kicking with everything he had. His boots finally found purchase on the rocky bottom. He dragged them both into the shallows, then up onto the muddy bank, laying her flat on her back. Her lips were blue, her face pale as death. "No," he said aloud, the first word he had spoken to another person in 3 days. "No, you do not get to die. Not today." He tilted her head back, remembering what an old doctor had taught him years ago, and pressed his mouth to hers, breathing air into her lungs. Once, twice, 3 times. He pressed on her chest, counting, breathing for her again. She convulsed, water spewing from her mouth as she turned her head and coughed violently. Quinn helped her onto her side as she retched river water onto the grass, her whole body shaking. When the coughing finally subsided, she collapsed back, gasping, her eyes squeezed shut. "You are alive," Quinn said, his own voice shaking more than he liked. "You are going to be fine." Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on his face with difficulty. They were the color of honey in sunlight, he noticed, even dulled with shock and pain. "You," she whispered hoarsely. "You saved me. The river had other plans for you, I just disagreed with them." He looked downstream where the wagon had disappeared around the bend. "Was anyone else with you?" "No," she managed, coughing again. "Just me. The horses, they spooked, I could not hold them." "Horses are likely dead or halfway to the next county by now." He studied her carefully, noting the torn dress, the bleeding scrape on her temple, the way she was still shivering despite the warm May afternoon. "Can you stand? We need to get you dry and warm before the shock sets in worse." She tried to push herself up, but her arms gave out. Quinn caught her before she fell back, and without asking permission, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, or perhaps the fear still coursing through his veins made her seem light. "What is your name?" he asked as he carried her toward where his horse stood waiting, well trained enough not to bolt despite the commotion. "Hope," she said, her teeth chattering. "Hope Harper. Quinn Xavier. My cabin is about 2 miles north. Can you hold on that long?" She nodded against his chest, and he felt the trust in that simple gesture like a weight. He had not been trusted by anyone in a very long time. Had not wanted to be. Getting them both onto the horse while she was half conscious and soaking wet took some maneuvering, But Quinn finally managed it, settling her in front of him so he could keep her steady while he rowed. She slumped against him, and he could feel the cold radiating from her body even through his own wet clothes. "Stay awake," he told her as they started north at a careful pace. "Talk to me. Where were you headed?" "Jamestown," she said, forcing the words out. "My aunt lives there, Margaret Harper." "Do you know her?" "I know the name. Runs the boarding house on Main Street." "Yes." Hope's voice was getting weaker. "My parents died last winter, influenza. Aunt Margaret said I could come live with her, help with the boarding house. I was coming from Richmond. Long journey to make alone. I am 19 years old, old enough to travel." There was a spark of defiance in her voice that made Quinn almost smile. "And I hired a guide in Richmond, but he took sick 2 days ago. I told him I could manage the last stretch. The road follows the river. It should have been simple." "Should have been," Quinn agreed. River had different ideas. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Why were you there?" Right at that moment, it was a good question, one Quinn had already asked himself. He normally took the northern route home from town, which was longer but avoided the river crossing. Today, for no reason he could name, he had chosen the river road. "Luck," he said finally. "Or something like it." "Providence," Hope murmured. "My mother would have called it Providence." Quinn said nothing to that. He had stopped believing in Providence the day his wife and unborn child died 6 years ago, leaving him alone in a cabin built for a family. But he did not say that to the shivering woman in his arms who had just nearly drowned. The cabin appeared through the trees, small and sturdy with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Quinn had built it himself, every log and beam, back when he still believed in futures and family. Now it was just shelter, a place to sleep between long days of working his small ranch and avoiding human contact as much as possible. He dismounted carefully, lifting Hope down and carrying her inside. The cabin was neat but sparse, furnished with only what one man needed and nothing more. He set her in the chair by the cold fireplace and quickly began building a fire. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said without looking at her, focusing on arranging kindling. "I will find you something dry." "I am fine," Hope said, but her voice shook with cold. "You are not fine. You are half frozen and in shock." Quinn lit the fire and stood, moving to the chest against the wall where he kept his clothes. He pulled out one of his shirts and a pair of trousers with a rope belt. "These will be too large, but they are dry. There is a screen in the corner. Can you manage yourself, or do you need help?" Pink colored her pale cheeks. "I can manage." He handed her the clothes and turned his back, busying himself with stoking the fire higher. He heard her struggle behind the screen, heard her sharp intake of breath that told him movement was painful. But he did not offer help again. She had her pride, and he would respect that. When she emerged, she looked almost lost in his shirt, the sleeves rolled up several times and the hem hanging to her knees over the trousers that she had belted tight. Her hair hung in wet tangles down her back, dark with water. "Better," Quinn said. He poured water from the pitcher into the kettle and hung it over the fire. "I will make tea. You should sit close to the fire." Hope sank into the chair again, holding her hands toward the flames. Quinn could not help but notice how delicate her fingers were, how the firelight played across her face. She was beautiful, he realized with an uncomfortable jolt. Not in the flashy way of saloon girls, but in a quiet, genuine way that made something in his chest ache. He turned away, focusing on finding the tea tin and mugs. When had he last looked at a woman and noticed she was beautiful? When had he last cared? "You live here alone?" Hope asked, looking around the cabin. "Yes." "For how long?" "6 years, give or take." "That is a long time to be alone." Quinn poured hot water over the tea leaves, watching them swirl and darken. "I prefer it." It was not entirely true, but it was simpler than the truth. He did not prefer solitude. He had just learned to endure it better than he could endure the alternative. He handed her a mug and she wrapped both hands around it, breathing in the steam. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I would be dead if not for you. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time, that is all, and you were in the right place at the right time." Her honey-colored eyes met his. "I do not believe in coincidence, Mr. Xavier." "Quinn," he said, "just Quinn." "Then you should call me Hope." He nodded, uncomfortable with the familiarity even as part of him welcomed it. "You should rest. That bed in the corner, you can use it." "I will sleep in the barn." "I cannot take your bed. You nearly drowned today. You can take my bed." His voice was firm. "I will ride to town tomorrow. Let your aunt know you are safe. She will be expecting you." Hope's face fell. "The wagon. Everything I owned was in that wagon." "Gone, most likely, or if we are lucky, caught somewhere downstream. I will look in the morning." "I had letters from my mother, a cameo that belonged to my grandmother." Her voice cracked. "Everything." Quinn felt an unfamiliar urge to comfort her, to say something that would ease the loss he saw in her expression. But he had no words for that. He had lost everything that mattered once too, and no words had helped. "Get some rest," he said instead. "Things will look clearer tomorrow." She nodded, setting down the mug and moving to the bed. Quinn turned away as she climbed under the quilts his wife had made, quilts he had not been able to bring himself to get rid of. He heard Hope sigh as she settled in, heard her breathing slowly even out. Only then did he let himself look at her again. In sleep, with the firelight playing across her face, she looked younger than 19, vulnerable in a way that made protective instincts he thought long dead stir in his chest. He grabbed a blanket and headed for the door. The barn was dry and comfortable enough, and he needed distance from the woman in his cabin, from the feelings she stirred up just by existing. But as he lay in the hayloft, listening to rain begin to fall on the roof, Quinn could not stop thinking about the moment he had pulled Hope from the river, about the terror he had felt when he thought she might be dead. He had not cared about anything in 6 years, had not let himself care. It was safer that way, simpler. Now a woman named Hope was sleeping in his bed, and Quinn Xavier had the uncomfortable feeling that his carefully constructed solitude was about to come crashing down around him. Morning came with birdsong and pale sunshine filtering through the barn boards. Quinn woke stiff and sore, his clothes finally dry but stiff with river mud. He took care of the animals first, checking on his mare and the handful of cattle he kept, then walked back to the cabin with more trepidation than made sense. Hope was awake, standing by the stove with a confused expression as she examined his meager cooking supplies. She had braided her hair, still damp but more manageable now, and his shirt was tucked neatly into the rolled waistband of his trousers. "I was trying to make breakfast," she said when she noticed him, "to thank you, but I cannot find much to work with." "I am not much of a cook," Quinn admitted. "I usually just fry some bacon and call it done." "Then let me." She shooed him toward the table. "I can make something from almost nothing. My mother taught me." Quinn sat, feeling strange in his own cabin, watching as Hope worked with economical movements that spoke of practice. She found his bacon and eggs, some flour and milk, and soon the cabin was filled with smells that Quinn had not experienced in years. Home cooking, the kind made with care instead of just necessity. "How are you feeling?" he asked as she set a plate in front of him, eggs and bacon and fresh biscuits that he had no idea how she had made so quickly. "Sore," she admitted, touching the scrape on her temple gingerly, "but alive, thanks to you." They ate in silence for a few minutes, Quinn trying not to show how good the food was, how much he had missed meals like this. Finally, he said, "I will ride to town this morning. Let your aunt know what happened. Then I will search downstream for your wagon. I want to come with you." You should rest. I have been resting. I feel fine. She met his eyes with that same defiance he had heard in her voice yesterday. And if we find my things, I want to be there. Quinn considered arguing, then nodded. He was learning that Hope Harper had a will of her own, and perhaps that was not a bad thing. We leave in an hour. The ride to Jamestown took longer with two on the horse, but Quinn found he did not mind the extra weight. The way Hope sat in front of him with a straightness to her spine that spoke of determination. She had changed back into her own dress, which had dried overnight though it was wrinkled and stained. Jamestown was a small but growing town, still rough around the edges but civilized enough with its church and school and Main Street lined with businesses. Margaret Harper's boarding house was the largest building on the north end, 3 stories of whitewashed wood with green shutters and a wraparound porch. Margaret herself came flying out the front door before they even dismounted, her gray hair escaping its bun and her face white with fear. Hope. Dear God, child, I have been out of my mind with worry. You were supposed to arrive yesterday. Hope slid from the horse and was immediately enveloped in her aunt's embrace. I am sorry, Aunt Margaret. There was an accident. Accident. Margaret held her niece at arm's length, taking in the torn dress and the scrape on her temple. What happened? Quinn explained briefly, keeping to the facts while Margaret's expression shifted from fear to horror to profound gratitude. When he finished, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Xavier, I owe you a debt I can never repay. If you had not been there, if you had not acted so quickly. Anyone would have done the same. But anyone was not there. You were. Margaret gripped his hand firmly. Anything you need, anything at all, you come to me. Do you understand? Quinn nodded, uncomfortable with the gratitude but understanding it. I am going to search downstream for her wagon and belongings. Thought you should know she was safe first. I will come too, Hope said immediately. You most certainly will not, Margaret said firmly. You have been through enough. Come inside, let me tend to that cut properly and get you into clean clothes. But my things can be found with or without you. Margaret's tone left no room for argument. Mr. Xavier is capable, I am sure. Hope looked ready to argue more, but her aunt was already guiding her toward the house. She glanced back at Quinn over her shoulder, and he saw the frustration in her expression mixed with something else. Gratitude, yes, but also a kind of reluctance to let him leave, as if his presence had become something she relied on. He understood the feeling. He had it too, and it unsettled him deeply. Quinn spent the rest of the day searching the riverbank downstream from where Hope had gone in. He found the wagon 3 miles down, caught in a tangle of fallen trees and half submerged. The horses were gone, dead or run off, but he managed to salvage a surprising amount from the wagon bed. A trunk of clothes, mostly waterlogged but savable. A small wooden box that contained letters tied with ribbon, miraculously still dry. The cameo Hope had mentioned, silver with a woman's profile carved in ivory. He loaded everything onto his horse and a borrowed pack mule from town and brought it all back to the boarding house as the sun was setting. Margaret met him at the door, her face lighting up when she saw what he carried. You found it. Oh, Mr. Xavier, Hope will be so relieved. Is she well? Resting upstairs, the shock caught up with her this afternoon. Margaret supervised as Quinn brought the salvaged items into the entryway. Will you stay for supper? It is the least I can do. Quinn almost refused automatically. He did not do social meals, did not sit at tables with people and make conversation. But before he could speak, Hope appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a clean dress of pale yellow, her hair properly dried and styled now. She looked like a different person from the half-drowned girl he had pulled from the river, but her eyes were the same, that honey gold that caught the lamplight. You found my things, she said, coming down the stairs quickly. She knelt by the trunk, opening it with reverent hands. "I thought they were lost forever. Most is there. Some water damage, but nothing that will not dry." Hope opened the small wooden box and pulled out the letters, pressing them to her chest as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what these mean to me." Quinn shifted uncomfortably, not knowing what to do with her tears. "I am glad they survived." "Stay for supper," Hope said, looking up at him. "Please, let me thank you properly." He should say no. Should make an excuse and ride home to his solitary cabin where emotions did not ambush him and beautiful women did not look at him with gratitude and something more. But instead, he heard himself say, "All right." Dinner at Margaret Harper's boarding house was a lively affair, with 6 boarders in addition to Quinn, Hope, and Margaret. The table was full, the conversation loud and friendly, and Quinn found himself slowly relaxing despite his intentions. Hope sat beside him, and he was acutely aware of every movement she made, every time their arms nearly touched. "How long have you lived in the area, Mr. Xavier?" asked one of the boarders, a young banker named Thomas. "About 8 years. Built my cabin about 6 years ago." "Quinn raises cattle," Hope added, and Quinn was surprised she remembered that detail from their brief conversation. "He lives north of town." "Alone?" Thomas asked. "That must be lonely." "I prefer quiet," Quinn said, more sharply than he intended. An awkward silence fell, broken by Margaret saying brightly, "Hope is going to help me run the boarding house. I have been needing an extra pair of hands, and she is wonderful at managing household affairs." "I am still learning," Hope said modestly, "but I am eager to help." The conversation moved on to town gossip and business matters, and Quinn found himself content to listen rather than participate. He watched Hope interact with the others, noticed how easily she laughed, how genuine her interest seemed in what people said. She had a gift for making people comfortable, he realized, the opposite of him in every way. After dinner, Hope walked him out to the porch while he prepared to ride home. The night was clear and cool, stars bright overhead. "Thank you again," she said, "for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I do not know how else to express what you have done for me. You have thanked me enough." Quinn mounted his horse, looking down at her in the lamplight spilling from the windows. "You will do well here with your aunt. Will I see you again?" The question came out quickly, almost nervously. "I mean, do you come to town often? Once a week for supplies, usually." "Then perhaps I will see you next week." It was not really a question, more a statement of intent. Quinn nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He wanted to see her again, wanted it with an intensity that frightened him. But he also knew that wanting led to attachment, and attachment led to loss, and he had promised himself he would never go through that again. "Good night, Hope Harper," he said finally. "Good night, Quinn Xavier." He rode home through the darkness, his mind full of honey-colored eyes and a smile that felt like sunlight. When he reached the cabin, it felt emptier than it ever had before, as if Hope's brief presence had expanded the space and then left it hollow. Quinn told himself it would pass, this feeling. He would go back to his routine, his solitude, his carefully maintained distance from the world. Hope would build a life with her aunt, would meet someone young and charming and whole, someone who had not already buried their heart with their wife. But as he lay in his own bed, smelling the faint lavender scent Hope had left on his pillows, Quinn knew he was lying to himself. The next week passed slowly, each day dragging like molasses. Quinn worked his land, tended his cattle, did all the things he always did. But his mind kept drifting to town, to the boarding house, to a yellow dress and braided hair, and a voice that called him by his first name. When Saturday came, he told himself he was not riding to town specifically to see Hope. He needed supplies, that was all. The fact that he took extra time to wash and put on his better shirt meant nothing. Margaret's boarding house was busy when he arrived, guests coming and going. He hesitated at the door, feeling foolish, but before he could decide whether to knock, Hope appeared from around the side of the building, carrying a basket of fresh laundry. She saw him and her whole face lit up. "Quinn, I was hoping you would come today." "Needed supplies," he said, too gruffly. "Of course." She set down the basket. "Did you have breakfast? We have fresh cinnamon rolls. I ate before I left. Then you can eat again. No one turns down Aunt Margaret's cinnamon rolls." She took his arm before he could protest, leading him inside. The next hour passed in a pleasant blur. He ate cinnamon rolls that melted on his tongue, drank strong coffee, and listened while Hope told him about her first week helping her aunt. She had a way of making ordinary things sound interesting, finding humor and joy in simple moments. "The boarding house is wonderful," she said, "but sometimes I miss the quiet. Living here is so different from the farm where I grew up." "You want quiet, you can visit my cabin anytime," Quinn said without thinking. "Nothing but birds and wind out there." Hope's eyes brightened. "Really?" "I would love that. Would this afternoon work? I have a few hours free before I need to help with dinner." Quinn had not actually meant the invitation, but looking at her hopeful expression, he could not bring himself to take it back. "All right, this afternoon." They rode out together after Quinn finished his errands in town, Hope sitting easily in front of him on the horse, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She asked him questions about the land they passed, about the trees and plants, and he found himself answering more fully than he usually did, sharing knowledge his father had taught him years ago. The cabin looked different with Hope in it again. Less empty, more like a home. She walked around slowly, touching things gently, looking at everything with interest. "You built this yourself?" she asked, running her hand along one of the log walls. "Mostly. Had help with the roof." "It is beautiful, simple but beautiful." She paused by the mantel where a single photograph sat in a wooden frame. A young woman with dark hair and a serious expression, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "Your wife," Quinn stiffened. "Yes, Caroline. She died 6 years ago during childbirth. The baby too." "I am so sorry." Hope's voice was soft with genuine sympathy. "That must have been unbearable." It was. He had not talked about Caroline in years, had not said her name aloud, but somehow with Hope the words came easier. "We had only been married a year. I built this cabin for her, for our family. After she died, I almost burned it down. Why did you not?" "Could not bring myself to. It was all I had left of her." Quinn moved to the window, looking out at the land he had worked alone for so long. "So I stayed, learned to live with the emptiness." Hope came to stand beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. "You should not have to live with emptiness. Caroline would not want that for you. You did not know her." "No, but I know that people who love us want us to be happy, even after they are gone. My mother told me that before she died. She made me promise not to stop living just because she was gone." Quinn looked at her, at the conviction in her expression, and felt something shift in his chest. "Your mother sounds like she was wise." "She was. I wish you could have met her." They stood together in silence for a moment, and Quinn realized this was the most honest conversation he had had in years. Hope had a way of drawing truth out of him, of making vulnerability feel safe instead of terrifying. "I should show you the rest of the property," he said, needing to move, to do something with the emotions swirling through him. "There is a creek on the far side that is worth seeing." They walked together through the afternoon sunshine, talking about everything and nothing. Hope told him about her childhood, about her parents and the small farm where she grew up. Quinn found himself sharing memories too, things he had not thought about in years. His father teaching him to ride, his mother's garden, the dreams he had once had for this land. By the time they headed back to town, the sun was setting and Quinn felt more relaxed than he had in longer than he could remember. Hope had fallen quiet, leaning back against him slightly as they rode, and he allowed himself to enjoy the simple pleasure of her presence. "Thank you for showing me your home," she said as they reached the boarding house. "It helped me understand you better." "What is there to understand? More than you show the world." She slid from the horse and looked up at him. "You are not as solitary as you pretend to be, Quinn Xavier. You just got used to being alone." Before he could respond, she turned and went inside, leaving him sitting on his horse in the gathering dusk, wondering how she had seen through him so easily. Over the next few weeks, a pattern developed. Quinn would ride to town on Saturdays for supplies, and Hope would find a reason to spend time with him. Sometimes they would have coffee at the boarding house, sometimes they would walk around town together, and sometimes she would ride back to his cabin and they would spend the afternoon talking. Quinn knew he should put a stop to it, should maintain his distance. But every Saturday he found himself looking forward to seeing her, counting the days until he could hear her laugh again. Hope was bringing him back to life whether he wanted it or not, and increasingly he found that he did want it. Other people began to notice. Margaret gave him knowing looks when he came by. The shopkeepers in town started greeting him by name, no longer used to seeing the reclusive rancher only in passing. And Thomas, the young banker who also boarded at Margaret's, began paying more attention to Hope, clearly seeing her as potential wife material. That bothered Quinn more than he wanted to admit. He would watch Thomas try to charm Hope at dinner, offering to accompany her places or bring her small gifts, and feel a burning in his chest that he recognized as jealousy. But what right did he have to be jealous? He was 12 years older than Hope, a widower still haunted by the past. Thomas was young and handsome and full of prospects. He could give Hope a future, but Hope did not seem interested in Thomas's attentions. She was polite but distant with him, and her eyes kept finding Quinn's across the dinner table, seeking him out like a compass finding north. It was Margaret who finally forced the issue, calling Quinn aside one Saturday evening after dinner. They stood on the back porch while the other boarders were in the parlor. "You care for her," Margaret said without preamble. "Do not try to deny it. I see how you look at her." Quinn said nothing, which was answer enough. "She cares for you too. Has since the moment you pulled her from that river." Margaret fixed him with a stern but kind look. "But she is young and does not know how to navigate these things. You are going to have to be the one to speak up, Quinn. If you want her, you need to tell her. I am too old for her, too broken." "You are 31, not ancient, and you are not broken, just wounded. There is a difference." Margaret put her hand on his arm. "Hope lost her parents, everything familiar. She is trying to build a new life here. Do not let your fear rob both of you of happiness." "What if I cannot make her happy? What if I fail her the way I failed Caroline?" "You did not fail Caroline. She died in childbirth, which happens and is not your fault." Margaret's voice was firm. "But if you push Hope away out of fear, that will be a choice. That will be a failure." Quinn rode home that night with Margaret's words echoing in his head. Was he pushing Hope away? Or was he just being realistic about his limitations, his inability to be what she deserved? The answer came 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon in late June, when Hope showed up at his cabin unannounced, riding a borrowed horse with a picnic basket tied to the saddle. "I thought we could have lunch by your creek," she said when he came out to meet her, surprise evident on his face. "Aunt Margaret packed enough food for both of us." Quinn helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "You rode all the way out here alone." "I am not helpless, Quinn. I can ride a horse without drowning." Her tone was teasing, but he saw the flash of independence in her eyes. They walked to the creek together, Hope carrying the basket while Quinn carried a blanket. The spot where the water pooled clear and cool under the shade of oak trees was one of his favorite places on the property, somewhere he came to think when the cabin felt too confining. Hope spread out the blanket and began unpacking the basket, laying out fried chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apple pie. They ate in comfortable silence at first, listening to the water and the birds until Hope finally said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you pull away every time we get close? I feel like whenever we have a good conversation, whenever there is a moment of real connection, you retreat behind your walls again." Quinn set down his food, suddenly not hungry. He had known this conversation was coming but had not prepared for it. "It is not you. I know it is not me. It is you and whatever fear you are carrying." Hope turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "I understand that you lost your wife, that you suffered terribly. But Quinn, you are still alive. You are still here. And I hope that you feel something for me, something more than just friendship." His heart was racing. "Hope, because I feel something for you. I have since the beginning, since you jumped into that river without hesitation and saved my life." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "I am not Caroline. I cannot replace her, and I would never try to. But I could love you if you would let me. I think I already do." Quinn looked at their joined hands, at her earnest face, and felt the walls he had built so carefully begin to crumble. "You deserve someone whole, someone without so much past weighing him down. I deserve someone who sees me, who values me, who makes me feel safe and challenged and alive all at once. That is you, Quinn." Her grip on his hand tightened. "I know you are scared. I am scared too. But being scared is not a good enough reason to turn away from something that could be wonderful." She was right. He knew she was right. And suddenly, sitting there by the creek with Hope's hand in his and her eyes full of hope that matched her name, Quinn found the courage he thought he had lost 6 years ago. "I am terrified," he admitted. "Terrified of losing someone again, of failing to protect you, of not being enough. You are enough. You have always been enough." Hope moved closer until they were nearly touching. "I am not asking for perfection, Quinn. I am just asking for a chance." He lifted his free hand to her face, cupping her cheek gently, feeling her lean into his touch. "I do care for you, more than I thought I could care about anyone again. You have brought light back into my life, Hope. You have made me want things I thought I had given up on." "Then stop fighting it," she whispered. "Stop fighting us." Quinn closed the distance between them, kissing her softly, tentatively, as if she might disappear if he was not careful. But Hope was solid and real under his hands, kissing him back with a certainty that steadied him. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing her in. "I am not good at this," he said. "At letting people in. I will probably mess it up. Then we will figure it out together." Hope smiled, radiant and sure. That is what people who care about each other do. They stayed by the creek until the sun began to set, talking about the future for the first time. Quinn told her about his plans for the ranch, dreams he had abandoned that now seemed possible again with Hope to share them with. She told him about wanting to help her aunt but also wanting a home of her own someday, a family. "This cabin could be a real home again," she said, looking at him with those honey gold eyes. "If you wanted it to be." "I would like that," Quinn admitted. "More than I can say." As he rode back to town with her that evening, Hope sitting in front of him on his horse while hers followed on a lead, Quinn felt something he had not felt in 6 years. He felt hopeful, not just content or surviving, but actually looking forward to tomorrow, to the possibilities that lay ahead. Margaret gave them both a knowing smile when they arrived back at the boarding house, and Hope's answering blush told Quinn that her aunt had probably known what would happen today, perhaps had even orchestrated it. Over the next few months, Quinn and Hope courted properly, though they both already knew where they were headed. He came to town more often, not just on Saturdays but whenever he could spare the time. They would walk together, have meals with Margaret and the boarders, attend church on Sundays. Quinn found himself becoming part of the community again. No longer the reclusive rancher but Hope's intended, welcomed and included. Thomas eventually gave up his pursuit of Hope, though not before making a few bitter comments about Quinn being too old for her. Hope handled it with grace, making it clear that her choice was made and she was happy with it. "He will find someone else," she told Quinn after an uncomfortable dinner where Thomas had been particularly sullen. "Someone who actually wants him. I only want you." Those words, simple as they were, meant everything to Quinn. He had spent so long believing he had nothing to offer, that his best days were behind him. But Hope saw something different. She saw potential, saw a future, saw a man worth loving. In September, as the leaves began to turn and the air grew crisp, Quinn asked Hope to marry him. He did it simply, without grand gestures, offering her the ring that had belonged to his grandmother. They were sitting on the porch of his cabin watching the sunset when he pulled it from his pocket. "I know I am not perfect," he said, holding out the simple gold band with its small diamond. "I know I come with complications and scars, but I love you, Hope Harper. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you see the best in people. I love how you brought me back to life when I thought I was content being half dead. Will you marry me?" Hope was crying, but she was smiling too, nodding before he even finished speaking. "Yes, yes, of course yes." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. He had never thought he would have this again, another chance at love, at family, at happiness. But Hope had given him all of that simply by being herself, by refusing to let him hide. They were married in October in the small church in Jamestown, with Margaret crying happy tears and half the town in attendance. Quinn had not realized how many friends he had made through Hope until he saw them all gathered, people who had welcomed him back into the community because of the woman he loved. Hope wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried wildflowers that Quinn had picked that morning. She looked beautiful walking down the aisle toward him, her face radiant with joy. When the preacher asked if he would take Hope as his wife, to love and cherish in sickness and health, Quinn answered with absolute certainty, "I will." And when Hope promised to love and honor him, Quinn believed her, believed in the future they would build together. The reception at the boarding house was lively and long, full of music and dancing and laughter. Quinn found himself actually enjoying it, not feeling the need to retreat or escape. With Hope's hand in his, he could face anything, even a room full of people. As the evening wound down, they slipped away to begin the ride back to the cabin, to the home that was now truly theirs. Margaret hugged them both tightly, whispering to Quinn, "Take care of her. And let her take care of you." "I will," he promised. The cabin glowed with lamplight when they arrived, and Quinn carried Hope over the threshold as tradition demanded. She laughed as he set her down, looking around at the space that had seemed so empty for so long but now felt complete. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," Quinn said, pulling her close. "Mrs. Xavier," Hope repeated, testing out the name. "I like how that sounds." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, two people learning each other, building intimacy with patience and care. Quinn had worried he might be awkward after so many years alone, but with Hope, everything felt natural, right? She was his partner in this, as she was in everything else, meeting him with equal courage and desire. Afterward, Lying together in the darkness, Hope traced patterns on his chest and said, "Tell me what you are thinking." "That I am the luckiest man alive. That I do not deserve you, but I am grateful every day that you chose me anyway." "Stop saying you do not deserve me." "We deserve each other, Quinn. We both went through loss and came out stronger. We found each other when we both needed someone most." She kissed his shoulder. "This is exactly where we are both supposed to be." Quinn pulled her closer, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair, and allowed himself to believe it. This was where he was supposed to be. With Hope, in the home they would build together, looking forward instead of back. The first year of their marriage was one of adjustment and discovery. Hope brought life and warmth to the cabin, filling it with her presence and her touches. She planted a garden like Quinn's mother had once had, growing vegetables and flowers. She made curtains for the windows, brought in furniture from town, turned the stark bachelor space into a real home. Quinn taught her about ranching, about the cattle and the land, and discovered that Hope was a quick learner with a natural affinity for the work. She was not afraid of hard labor or getting dirty, pitching in alongside him during roundups and brandings. They developed routines together, comfortable patterns that made life feel stable and good. Morning coffee on the porch watching the sunrise. Evening walks down to the creek. Sunday dinners with Margaret and whoever else wanted to join them, but it was not all easy. They had arguments, moments when Quinn's tendency to withdraw clashed with Hope's need for openness, or when Hope's optimism felt overwhelming to Quinn's more cautious nature. But they learned to fight fair, to talk through problems instead of letting them fester. "Marriage is work," Hope said one evening after they had reconciled from a disagreement about expanding the herd, "but it is good work, worth doing work." "I am sorry I get stubborn sometimes," Quinn said. "I am sorry I push too hard sometimes." She took his hand. "But we are learning, right? Getting better at this, we are." And they were. Each disagreement taught them more about each other, about how to communicate and compromise. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Hope told Quinn she was pregnant. He felt a moment of pure terror, remembering Caroline, remembering the blood and the screaming and the silence that followed. But Hope put her hands on his face and made him look at her. "I am not Caroline," she said firmly. "This is not the same situation. I am strong and healthy, and we have a good doctor in town now. Everything will be fine." Quinn wanted to believe her, but the fear lingered through her entire pregnancy. He was overprotective, hovering, trying to keep her from doing anything too strenuous. Hope tolerated it for a while, then finally sat him down and had a serious conversation. "You cannot wrap me in cotton wool, Quinn. I am pregnant, not dying. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Women die having babies since the beginning of time too. Yes, they do. And that could happen to me, no matter how careful we are, but it probably will not." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You cannot control everything. You have to trust that things will work out." "I do not know if I can." "Then trust me." She took his hands, placed them on her swollen belly where their child moved and kicked. "Trust that I know my own body. Trust that I will ask for help if I need it. Can you do that?" Quinn closed his eyes, feeling his child move under his palms, and made himself breathe through the fear. "I will try. That is all I ask." The months passed slowly for Quinn, each day another step closer to the moment he dreaded. But Hope bloomed in her pregnancy, radiating health and happiness. Margaret came to stay with them a week before the baby was due, and the doctor from town promised he would come immediately when labor started. When Hope's labor began on a warm July evening, Quinn nearly panicked. But Hope stayed calm, breathing through the contractions, telling him exactly what she needed. The doctor arrived within an hour, and Margaret shooed Quinn out of the bedroom. "You will just make her nervous," Margaret said. Go chop wood or something." Quinn paced instead, wearing a path on the porch while the sounds from the bedroom made his heart race. It sounded too much like before, like Caroline, and he had to grip the porch railing to keep from bursting in there. But then, after hours that felt like days, he heard it. A baby's cry, strong and loud and alive. Margaret appeared at the door, tears streaming down her face, smiling wide. "You have a son, Quinn. A healthy baby boy, and Hope is fine. Tired, but fine." Quinn's legs nearly gave out. He stumbled into the bedroom where Hope lay propped against pillows, sweaty and exhausted but smiling as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he entered, and the love in her eyes nearly undid him. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Quinn approached slowly, hardly daring to breathe. Hope pulled back the blanket to reveal a red, wrinkled face, eyes squeezed shut, tiny fists waving. The baby made small, snuffling noises, already rooting around for food. "He is perfect," Quinn whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers immediately wrapped around his finger, gripping with surprising strength. "He is ours," Hope said. "Ours and healthy and here. Everything is all right, Quinn, do you see? Everything is all right." And finally, feeling his son's hand wrapped around his finger and seeing Hope alive and well, Quinn let go of the fear he had been carrying for 9 months. She was right. Everything was all right. They named him James after Quinn's father, with Hope's father's name, Robert, as a middle name. James Robert Xavier made his opinions known loudly and often, especially during the night. But Quinn found he did not mind the sleepless nights or the constant demands. Each cry, each diaper change, each feeding was proof that his son was alive and healthy. Hope recovered quickly from the birth, and soon the cabin was filled with the sounds and smells of new parenthood. Drying diapers on the line, the sweet milk, scent of a nursing baby, lullabies sung in the middle of the night. Quinn discovered reserves of patience he did not know he had, walking James for hours when he was colicky, changing him, bathing him, just sitting and watching him sleep. He had missed all of this with the child he lost before it was born, and he was determined to savor every moment now, even the difficult ones. "You are a wonderful father," Hope told him one evening, watching as he expertly changed James and got him dressed again. Natural added, "I am terrified every moment that I will do something wrong." "That just means you care. Bad fathers do not worry about doing wrong." She came to stand beside him, leaning against his shoulder as they both looked down at their son. "We are doing fine, Quinn. Better than fine." As James grew from infant to toddler, the cabin seemed to shrink. Quinn began planning an addition, more bedrooms for the children they both hoped would come. Hope was already talking about wanting James to have siblings, wanting a house full of life and laughter. Their second child came 2 years after James, a daughter they named Clara after Hope's mother. This time Quinn was calmer during the labor, trusting that Hope knew what she was doing, that everything would be all right. And it was. Clara arrived quickly, as if impatient to join the family, and from the beginning she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "You are soft for her," Hope teased, watching Quinn carry Clara around even though she was perfectly content in her cradle. "She is little. She needs holding. She has you well trained already." But Hope was just as soft with James, cuddling him extra even as he grew more independent, reading him stories and teaching him his letters. They balanced each other well as parents, Hope with her patience and gentle firmness, Quinn with his quiet strength and steady presence. The ranch grew along with their family. Quinn hired help for the first time, a young man named Peter who was learning the cattle business. With extra hands, Quinn could spend more time with his family, could take mornings to teach James about the animals or afternoons to walk with Hope while Clara rode on his shoulders. Life was full and good and busy. Everything Quinn had once thought he would never have again. There were hard days still, times when grief for Caroline and their lost child would ambush him unexpectedly. But Hope never begrudged him those moments, understanding that old losses did not disappear just because new joys arrived. "She was part of your story," Hope said once, after finding Quinn standing in front of Caroline's photograph on a particularly difficult anniversary. "She helped make you who you are. I would never ask you to forget her. You are an extraordinary woman, Hope Xavier. I am a practical woman who knows you can hold love for more than one person in your heart." She put her arms around him from behind, resting her head against his back. "Love is not a limited resource. It grows to fill whatever space you give it." By the time James was 5 and Clara was 3, Hope was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first two, with more sickness and discomfort. The doctor said it might be twins, which both thrilled and terrified Quinn and Hope. He was right. In the spring of their 8th year of marriage, Hope labored for nearly a full day before delivering twin boys, Henry and Harrison. The births were difficult, leaving Hope weak and exhausted for weeks afterward. Quinn moved Margaret into the cabin to help, and for the first time, he understood true panic at the thought of losing Hope. But she recovered slowly, regaining her strength day by day, fed by good food and rest and the love of her family. The twins were demanding, 2 little boys who seemed determined to keep everyone awake and busy, but James and Clara helped as much as they could for their ages. "4 children," Quinn said one evening, sitting on the porch with Hope while the children slept and Margaret watched over them. "We have 4 children. We do." Hope leaned against him, still tired but content. "Is that enough for you?" "It is more than enough. It is more than I ever dreamed of having." He kissed the top of her head. "But only if you are done. I will not risk you again if pregnancy is getting harder." "I think I am done," Hope admitted. 4 is a good number. A full house but not overwhelming. 4 is perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the trees. This was Quinn's favorite time, when the work was done and the children were asleep and it was just him and Hope, together in the peace they had built. "Do you ever think about that day?" Hope asked. "The day I fell in the river, sometimes." "Why?" "Because it changed everything. If you had not been there, if you had not jumped in after me, none of this would exist. James, Clara, the twins, this whole life we have built. You would have built a different life, a good one. Maybe, but I cannot imagine it being better than this." She turned to look at him. "You saved me that day, Quinn, not just from drowning, but from a half-life, from just going through motions without real purpose or joy." "I think we saved each other," Quinn said. "I was drowning too, just in grief instead of water. You pulled me out of that just as surely as I pulled you out of the river. Then we are even." "We are." He pulled her closer, holding her as the stars came out overhead. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Hope, for pushing past my walls and making me live again. Thank you for letting me in. For being brave enough to try again." She kissed him softly. "I love you, Quinn Xavier. I love the life we have made together. I love you too, more than I ever thought I could love anyone." Years passed in the comfortable rhythm of family life. James grew tall and serious, taking after his father in temperament and looks. Clara was bright and cheerful, always singing or laughing or getting into some new adventure. The twins were wild and energetic, keeping everyone on their toes with their schemes and scrapes. Quinn and Hope weathered storms together, both literal and metaphorical. Droughts that threatened the cattle, illnesses that swept through the family, disagreements about raising the children or managing the ranch. but they faced everything as a team, their bond growing stronger with each challenge overcome. Margaret remained a constant presence in their lives until she passed peacefully in her sleep when James was 12. They all grieved her loss, but Hope took comfort in knowing that her aunt had lived to see her settled and happy, had known her great nieces and nephews, had been part of the family they built. "She loved you so much," Quinn told Hope as they stood by Margaret's grave. "She was so proud of you." "She loved you too. She told me once that you were the answer to prayers she did not know she was praying." Hope wiped tears from her cheeks. "She said you brought me back to life after losing my parents. We both did that for each other." As the children grew older and more independent, Quinn and Hope found themselves with more time together again. They would ride out to the creek where he had proposed, would sit on the porch in the evenings talking for hours like they had when they were courting, would steal moments alone to remember why they had fallen in love in the first place. "I am getting gray hair," Hope said one morning, examining herself in the mirror. "You are beautiful," Quinn said immediately. "You are biased." "I am honest." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You are more beautiful now than the day I pulled you from that river. I was half drowned and covered in mud that day, and still the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." He kissed her neck. "You are my whole world, Hope. A few gray hairs do not change that." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with those honey gold eyes that still caught his breath. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky. Or maybe it was Providence, like you said all those years ago." "Providence," Hope repeated. "Yes, I think it was. We were meant to find each other, meant to build this life. I believe that now. I did not used to, but I do now." James was 18 and ready to head east to school when Quinn sat him down for a serious conversation. His oldest son was a good young man, responsible and hardworking, but Quinn wanted to make sure he understood what he was leaving. "The ranch will be yours someday," Quinn said. "Yours and your siblings, but you do not have to take it if it is not what you want. You can build your own life, find your own path." "I want the ranch," James said firmly. "I want this life, but I also want to learn more to bring new ideas back and make the ranch even better." "Is that all right?" Pride swelled in Quinn's chest. "That is more than all right. That is exactly what you should do." Clara surprised everyone by deciding she wanted to be a teacher, studying with the schoolmarm in town until she was ready to take over the position. The twins talked about opening a business together in town, some kind of general store or trading post. "They are all finding their way," Hope said as she and Quinn watched Clara lead a classroom full of students. "We did something right, raising them. You did something right, I just tried not to mess it up too badly." "Stop that. You are a wonderful father, our children adore you." It was true. All four of their children had strong bonds with both parents, coming to Quinn with their troubles just as often as they went to Hope. He had learned to be open with them in a way his own father never was, to tell them he loved them, to show affection freely. When James returned from school 3 years later with a degree and a young woman he wanted to marry, Quinn and Hope welcomed her into the family with open arms. Sarah was smart and kind, a perfect match for their serious son, and she fit into ranch life as if she had been born to it. The wedding was held at the ranch, under the oak trees by the creek where Quinn and Hope had shared so many important moments. Watching his son marry reminded Quinn of his own wedding, of the hope and joy and possibility of that day. He caught Hope's eye across the crowd and saw that she was thinking the same thing. "Another generation," she whispered as they danced together at the reception. "Our grandchildren will play in this same creek someday. You are getting ahead of yourself." "Am I?" Hope smiled knowingly. "Sarah has that same glow I had when I was pregnant with James." Quinn looked over at his new daughter-in-law with new eyes. Really? Just wait. They will tell us in a few weeks. Hope was right, as she usually was. James and Sarah announced they were expecting a month later, and suddenly, Quinn was facing the prospect of becoming a grandfather. It felt impossible and right all at once. Another chapter in the story that had started with a river rescue 22 years ago. Their first grandchild, a boy named Quinn Xavier, arrived in the spring. Holding him for the first time, seeing his son become a father, Quinn felt the circle complete. He had been so broken once, so convinced his life was over. But here he was, surrounded by family, holding his grandson, living a life richer than he ever imagined possible. "What do you think?" James asked, nervous as all new fathers are. "I think he is perfect. I think you and Sarah are going to be wonderful parents." Quinn handed the baby back carefully. "And I think your mother was right all those years ago when she said everything would be all right." Hope appeared at his elbow, reaching for her grandson with eager arms. "Let me hold my beautiful boy." They stood together, Quinn and Hope, watching as their son and daughter-in-law fussed over the newest Xavier. Clara came in with her new husband, a lawyer from Richmond, eager to meet her nephew. The twins, now 20 and running a successful trading business in town, brought gifts and jokes and chaos. This was family, Quinn thought. Loud and messy and full of love. Everything he had lost and found again, everything Hope had given him just by refusing to let him stay isolated. That night, lying in bed with Hope curled against his side as she had been for over 20 years, Quinn said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For saving me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "We saved each other," Hope said, repeating the words from so long ago. "We gave each other this life." "Then I am grateful for that river, for the current that brought you to me. And I am grateful for the cowboy who did not hesitate, who jumped in after a stranger and changed both our lives forever." Quinn kissed her softly, tasting the salt of happy tears on her lips. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting. 4 children, now grown and starting their own families. A ranch that thrived and sustained them. A love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. "I love you, Hope Xavier. Today, tomorrow, always." "I love you too, Quinn Xavier. Forever." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had for over 2 decades, the way they would for all the years remaining to them. Outside, the creek burbled over its rocks, the same water that had almost claimed Hope, but instead had brought her to Quinn. The trees whispered in the night breeze, sheltering the cabin where they had built their life together. And in the morning, there would be grandchildren to spoil and children to advise and work to be done. There would be laughter and love, and all the beautiful ordinary moments that made up a life well lived. But for now, there was just this. 2 people who had saved each other, who had built a family and a legacy from the ashes of loss and loneliness, sleeping peacefully in the home they had made together, in the wild Virginia countryside where their story began. The years continued to be kind to them. More grandchildren came, filling the ranch with young voices and energy. Quinn taught them to ride and rope and care for the animals, just as his father had taught him. Hope read them stories and baked them treats and made sure they knew they were loved unconditionally. Clara had children of her own with her husband, 3 girls who were as bright and cheerful as their mother. The twins eventually married sisters from town, causing no end of confusion at family gatherings but doubling the joy. The Xavier family grew and flourished, respected in the community, known for their integrity and kindness. Quinn and Hope grew old together, their hair turning silver, their movements slower but no less purposeful. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, hands clasped, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, and remember the journey that brought them here. You have any regrets? Hope asked him once when they were both well into their 60s. Quinn thought about it seriously. I regret the years I spent alone, walled off from the world, but I cannot regret them too much, because they led me to you. I regret that my parents did not live to see this, to know their grandchildren, but I think they would be proud of the life I built. They would be. Just as Caroline would be proud of the life I have lived since losing her. Quinn squeezed Hope's hand. We have been blessed, you and I. We have been. Hope leaned her head on his shoulder, and I would do it all again every moment if it meant ending up here with you. Even the nearly drowning part, especially that part, that was where it all began. When Quinn was 70 and Hope was 67, he began to slow down noticeably. His joints ached in the cold, his breath came shorter after exertion. The doctor said his heart was wearing out, that he should take it easy, rest more. But Quinn was not good at resting. He still rode out to check the cattle, still helped with the heavy work despite James and his grandsons telling him to stop. I am not dead yet, he would grumble. I can still pull my weight. But Hope could see the change in him, could see how tired he got, how pale he sometimes looked. She started insisting he rest in the afternoons, would bring him tea and sit with him, sometimes reading aloud while he dozed. You are fussing, he complained. I am caring for the man I love. Let me fuss. I am not ready to be old, Hope. There is still so much I want to do. Then do it. But do it wisely, with rest between. You do not have to prove anything to anyone, Quinn. One evening in late autumn, with the leaves turning gold and red and the air crisp with the promise of winter, Quinn and Hope were sitting on their porch as usual when he said, I want you to know something. Hope looked at him, concerned by the serious tone. What is it? These past 43 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. Every single day, even the hard ones, has been better because I spent it with you. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. If my time is running short, I want you to know that I am at peace. You gave me a life beyond anything I deserved or imagined. Stop talking like you are dying tomorrow. You are just tired, Quinn. You need rest. I know, but I also know I am not young anymore, that my body is wearing out, and I do not want to leave things unsaid. He looked at her with those eyes that still saw into her soul. Promise me something, anything. Promise me you will not stop living when I am gone, that you will let our children and grandchildren take care of you, that you will keep finding joy in every day. Tears rolled down Hope's cheeks. I cannot promise that. I do not know how to be in this world without you. The same way I learned after losing Caroline. You survive, and eventually you learn to live again. He wiped her tears away gently. I will not leave you alone, Hope. Our family is too big, too present. And I will still be with you in every sunset we watched together, in every memory we made. I am not ready to lose you. I am not planning on going anywhere just yet, but when the time comes, I need to know you will be all right. Hope could not speak, could only nod through her tears. Quinn pulled her close, holding her as they watched the sun set one more time, painting the sky in glory. Quinn lived 5 more years, years filled with laughter and family and simple joys. He got to see all of his children settled and happy, got to know a dozen grandchildren and even meet 2 great-grandchildren. His body might have been failing, but his spirit remained strong, his love for his family undimmed. When he finally passed, it was peacefully in his sleep, Hope beside him as she had been for 48 years of marriage. The family gathered for the funeral, 3 generations of Xavier's mourning the man who had built the foundation they all stood on. Hope stood by his grave with dry eyes, having cried all her tears in private. She felt James's hand on her shoulder, Clara's arm around her waist, the twins flanking her protectively. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her, supporting her, exactly as Quinn had known they would. "He loved us all so much," Clara said. "He did," Hope agreed. "And we loved him. That love does not end just because he is gone." She kept her promise to Quinn, continuing to live fully even in her grief. She moved into town to be closer to the children, spending her days with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and the life they had built together. But every week, she would ride out to the ranch that James now ran, would walk down to the creek where she and Quinn had spent so many hours. She would sit on the bank and talk to him, telling him about the family, about the new babies being born and the business ventures succeeding and all the daily joys and sorrows of life. "I miss you," she would say to the wind and the water. "Every single day I miss you, but I am keeping my promise. I am living, not just surviving. I am finding joy where I can." Hope lived to be 84, sharp and engaged until the very end. When she finally passed, surrounded by family in the bedroom of the house Clara and her husband had given her, her last words were, "Take me to the creek. Bury me beside Quinn." They did, laying her to rest next to her husband under the oak trees they had both loved. The entire family gathered for the funeral. Xaviers from all over Virginia and beyond. All of them descended from the cowboy who jumped into a river to save a stranger, and the woman who had saved him right back. On the headstone, James had inscribed, "Hope Harper Xavier, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She rescued him from a life alone. He rescued her from the river. Together they built a legacy of love." And beneath it, Quinn's stone read, "Quinn Xavier, beloved husband, father, grandfather." His courage in one moment changed everything. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, each new Xavier learning the stories of Quinn and Hope, of the river rescue that started it all, of the love that sustained them through nearly 5 decades together. The creek still bubbled over its rocks, the cabin still stood solid and strong, and the legacy they built together lived on in every child and grandchild and great-grandchild who bore the Xavier name. It was a story that began with water and fear, and a split-second decision to act. But it became so much more than that. It became a testament to the power of second chances, to the courage it takes to love again after loss, to the possibility of building something beautiful from the broken pieces of the past. Quinn had been drowning in grief and loneliness, and Hope had been drowning in the river. But they pulled each other to safety, to solid ground, to a life neither could have built alone. And in doing so, they created something that would outlast them both. A family built on love, a ranch built on hard work, and a story that would be told for generations about the cowboy and the woman he saved, who saved him right back. Their love story was written in the land they worked, in the children they raised, in every sunset they watched together. It was a story of the wild Virginia frontier, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, of finding home in another person's arms. And it was a story that, even long after both of them were gone, continued to inspire anyone who heard it. Because it proved that one moment of courage, one act of selfless bravery, one willingness to reach out to another human being in need, could change everything. Could build a family, could create a legacy, could turn loneliness into belonging and loss into love. The creek still flows, the oak trees still stand, and somewhere in the rustle of leaves and the whisper of water over rocks, the story of Quinn and Hope continues to echo. A reminder that we are all capable of rescuing and being rescued, of building something beautiful from even the darkest moments, of finding love when and where we least expect it. And that is exactly as it should be, exactly as they would have wanted it. Their story did not end with death but continued on in every life they touched, every descendant who carried forward their values, every couple who heard their tale and believed in second chances. Quinn rescued Hope from the river. Hope rescued Quinn from a life alone, and together they created something that would never die. A love story for the ages.